And you notice I'm saying enslaved as opposed to slave. And that is because people had to be held in bondage. People were not naturally born something called a slave. People had to be held in bondage, okay? And Kanye West was wrong. Enslaved people resisted all the time, okay? So Kanye needs to read a book, all right? So one of the most prolific ways that enslaved people resisted was by running away.
Hi guys, my name is Anika Kabir and we're here today with Charmaine Nelson, who is an art history professor at the University of McGill. So as you said, being an enslaved individual strips one of their identity. So for you, how important is it to embrace diversity in today's day and age?
Fundamentally, when you were captured in Africa, if you're an African-born enslaved person, when you're put on the slave ship, you are a sex or an age. So you literally didn't have a name from that period, from that point on. And also you go on the slave ship literally in shackles and unclothed. So you're stripped of all your material possessions as well. So we have to think too culturally what survives that, what were enslaved Africans able to recreate on the other side of the Atlantic. The other part of that too is when you got to the Americas, you were renamed. So you're usually given a name in the European tradition of the colonizer, and your last name became the family name of the person who owns you. So that's what I mean by being stripped of your tradition and stripped of your identity. So your question was then, what does it mean today, for us today?
Yeah, to embrace diversity.
Part of it is, in Canada, we don't understand this to be a part of our history. We don't understand that slavery happened here for over 200 years in both French and English Canada. So I think we're on a very surface level. We're at the point of many institutions having diversity policies that are literally, if you scratch the surface, they're unenforced and unenforceable. So we don't have in Canada something called affirmative action like the US that actually has teeth and power and offices and money behind it, where the state or the federal government will actually enforce the employment of a range of people from different ethnicities and races. In Canada, we have these diversity policies that actually come to be window dressing, so that the institution looks good to the public, but if you look inside the institution, there's very little diversity. So we have to actually come to grips in Canada that we have a race problem because we have a colonial history, which includes something like slavery, and actually think about then what diversity means in practical terms for actually sharing power at the top, okay? So, and that we're not doing that at all in Canada right now.
Exactly, so like you're saying, like in Canada, we don't really know about this enslaved history and we're not very aware of it. So what really motivated you to go into this field of study, and why do you think there isn't much people that are...
Yeah, okay, so for me, I trained as an art historian with all 3 degrees, so BFA, MA, and PhD. And what I found in studying art history was a very white, male-dominated, Eurocentric field. So why I stayed in it, though, is that I was inspired by the absence of myself. So a person who was not inspired by that could never stay in art history because it doesn't speak to us as Indigenous and people of color. So what I mean, the professors back in the day when I was studying would show images, historical images, and artworks that had Black subjects in them, with white people, for instance, but they talk around the Black body. They wouldn't say anything about why the Black person was also in, let's say, a painting like Manet's Olympia, where there's a white woman and a Black woman, okay? They'd only talk about the white woman. So I would ask the question, why would Manet in 1863 choose a Black woman to put in this, right? And we're talking about France, who had had a huge empire and who had, you know, slavery in places like Haiti, Martinique, and Guadeloupe. And the professors could not answer my question. But to their credit, they validated my question and said, that would be a great topic for you to write a paper on. By all means, please do that. So without that encouragement, I wouldn't have pursued art history and I wouldn't have pursued it in this way, which of course, now here's the second part to your question. Because I was interested in 18th and 19th century art, that's smack in the middle of slavery. So I was like, if I want to understand why these Black subjects are in this artwork in this period, I have to understand slavery because many of these subjects being represented are enslaved people. So to do this analysis justice, I have to understand what slavery was. And because I'm also a Canadianist, so when I did my MA at Concordia, it was in Canadian art history. It led me into then an understanding of Canadian slavery as well, not just the typical study of the American South or tropical locations like Jamaica.
Thank you very much. It's a very heavy subject. It really gets you thinking. Thank you for joining us today. So.